This wasn't just a viral clip, it was a setup nobody saw coming. A cemetery, a legacy, and a moment that crossed a line hip-hop doesn't forgive. But when the footage leaked, it didn't just expose disrespect. It exposed a deeper game of influence, manipulation, and a reaction that may have been planned from the start. The video is only 14 seconds long, but in those 14 seconds, it managed to detonate an entire corner of hip-hop culture. Not with a diss track, not with an interview, not even with a planned rollout. Just a raw, unfiltered moment that spread across the internet like something nobody was supposed to see. Because in that clip, King Harris, son of T.I., is standing inside a cemetery, but it's not just any cemetery. It's the resting place of Sabrina Jackson, 50 Cent's mother. And what he does there is what changed everything. He's laughing. Not nervous, not emotional, not regretful. He's laughing like he's filming content, like it's a backdrop, like the weight of where he is hasn't even registered in his mind. The camera shakes slightly as he moves closer to the graves, pointing around like he's narrating a joke, only he understands. Then he leans toward the lens and says something that instantly freezes the entire internet. "Y'all legends ain't that legendary to me." That one sentence didn't trend, it detonated. Because in hip-hop, disrespect is common, beefs are normal, clout chasing is expected, but cemeteries are different, graves are different, mothers are different. And 50 Cent's mother, Sabrina Jackson, is not just a name in his story, she's the origin of it. The trauma that shaped him, the pain he has referenced his entire career, the foundation of everything he became. So when the clip hit timelines, people didn't react at first. They paused, replayed it, lowered the brightness, turned the volume up, because the brain struggles to accept what it's seeing when something crosses a line that deep. And somewhere else, 50 Cent saw it too. According to people close to the situation, he didn't speak immediately. He didn't tweet. He didn't joke. He didn't react the way he normally would. He just stared at the screen for a moment longer than usual, then leaned back and said something barely audible. No, he didn't just do that. And then came the silence. That's the part people misunderstand about 50 Cent. Silence isn't calm. Silence is calculation. When he goes quiet, it usually means the emotional reaction is already over and the strategic phase has started. But while the internet assumed this was just another reckless celebrity kid moment, something deeper was already surfacing behind the scenes. Because King Harris didn't just wake up and decide to go to that cemetery. He was led there. Not physically dragged, not forced, but guided slowly, deliberately, through influence that didn't look like control at first. People close to King say he has recently been surrounded by older industry figures, men with history, resentment, and unfinished business in hip-hop. Individuals who feel overlooked, erased, or disrespected by the modern industry. Men who don't have direct access to power anymore, but still understand how to influence those who do. And King, in their eyes, was perfect. A young celebrity with a famous last name, emotional, impulsive, desperate to prove he wasn't just T.I.'s son. Someone constantly fighting for identity in a world that already defined him. That combination doesn't create confidence, it creates vulnerability. And vulnerability in this environment becomes a tool. According to insiders, King had been spending time with figures who constantly fed him the same narrative, that he needed a defining moment, something loud enough to separate him from his father's shadow, something that would force the world to respect him. You gotta show them you fearless. You can't be soft like the industry kids. You bigger than your name. You need a moment they can't ignore. At first, it sounded like motivation. Then it started sounding like instruction. And eventually, it became direction. Because the cemetery location didn't come from nowhere. The timing didn't come from instinct. Even the way King speaks in the video, confident, almost rehearsed in tone, raised questions among people who know how content is engineered in today's attention economy. This wasn't random behavior. It was staged energy. Meanwhile, inside the Harris household, the reaction was immediate and chaotic. T.I. reportedly saw the clip and went silent first, then angry, then something closer to fear. Not fear of 50 Cent as an artist, but fear of what happens when disrespect turns personal at that level. He's said to have tried calling King repeatedly. No answer, texts unread, calls ignored. Tiny was crying. Family members were pacing, because they understood something the internet didn't fully grasp yet. This wasn't about a viral moment anymore. This was about consequences that don't stay online. And while T.I. was trying to contain the situation, King wasn't slowing down. He was still online, still posting, still acting like he had just done something powerful instead of something irreversible. But what nobody outside realized yet was this: King wasn't fully alone in that moment either. There was a voice behind the camera. At first, just encouragement, laughs, say it again, go on, don't edit that out. Then something more pointed, more intentional, words that didn't just react to the moment, but shaped it. And that detail changed everything. Because it meant King wasn't just the person in the video. He was the instrument in it. The real shock wasn't just what was said in that cemetery. It was how comfortably it was said there, as if the emotional weight of the location had been mentally removed before the camera ever started rolling. And that only happens when someone else prepares the moment for you. That's when the narrative split in two. To the public, it looked like a young celebrity losing control. But to people watching closely, it looked like something else entirely. A carefully engineered provocation designed to hit the most sensitive nerve possible in one of hip-hop's most guarded figures. Because 50 Cent doesn't just respond to disrespect. He studies it. He archives it. He waits. And now, with footage circulating, reactions escalating, and the internet dissecting every frame, one uncomfortable truth started forming in the background. This wasn't the end of a mistake. It was the beginning of a chain reaction. And King Harris may not be the one controlling where it leads. What makes this situation even more disturbing is that King Harris didn't fully understand the gravity of what he was stepping into. To him, it wasn't war. It wasn't spiritual consequence. It wasn't a line that could never be uncrossed. It looked like content. It felt like rebellion. It sounded like confidence. He thought disrespecting the dead would make him look fearless. He thought people would call it bold. He thought the internet would crown him for it. But what he didn't know, what he was never taught in the moment he decided to chase a different identity, was that in certain circles of hip-hop, graves aren't just places. They're boundaries, sacred boundaries. And crossing them doesn't create attention. It creates consequences that don't stay online. And in this case, the most dangerous part wasn't even King's ignorance. It was that someone knew exactly how to use it. Because behind the scenes, this wasn't just a reckless moment gone viral. It was being shaped, directed, encouraged, like a slow psychological setup that didn't reveal itself until it was already too late. And then came the leak that changed everything. A set of private messages surfaced briefly on a small gossip page before being deleted. But in that short window, the internet did what it always does, screenshotted everything. The conversation was between King and an older industry figure. "King, you sure this gonna work?" The reply came fast. "Trust me, 50 won't touch you. He'll look weak if he reacts to a kid." Then another message followed immediately after. "And if he does react, even better." That second line shifted the entire meaning of the situation. Because suddenly, this wasn't clout chasing. It wasn't even stupidity. It was bait. Deliberate bait designed to push one of the most calculated figures in hip-hop into a public reaction. A trap built not just to provoke 50 Cent, but to control how he would be perceived if he responded. The goal wasn't just disrespect. The goal was reaction engineering. And that's when the first major fracture appeared in the story. Someone on T.I.'s side recognized the number tied to those messages. It wasn't random. It wasn't anonymous. It belonged to a former associate connected to Ja Rule's old circle, someone with a long, documented history of instigating tension with 50 Cent during the height of their early 2000s feud. A man known for one thing, keeping old fires alive. When T.I. found out who was behind it, the reaction inside the Harris household reportedly turned explosive. Because now it wasn't just about King making a mistake. It was about King being guided into one. Witnesses described T.I. confronting his son directly, voice raised, frustration turning into something heavier. "He's using you," he said. "He don't care about you. He trying to start a war through you." But King didn't back down. He pushed back harder. "Nah," he said, "he believes in me. He sees what you don't." That sentence reportedly hit the room differently. Because it wasn't just disagreement. It was alignment with someone outside the family over the family itself. Tiny Harris, according to people close to the situation, broke down immediately after hearing it. Not because of the argument itself, but because it confirmed something deeper. King wasn't just acting out. He was being convinced. And then came the financial layer. When T.I.'s team allegedly reviewed D. King's recent transactions, a pattern emerged that made everything darker. Multiple payments, small at first, then larger. $1,000, $3,500, $7,000, $12,000, all traced back to the same source, connected to the same older figure from the messages. That changed the narrative instantly. This wasn't mentorship. This wasn't influence in the abstract sense. This was funding. King wasn't just being advised. He was being paid. And once that truth surfaced internally, the entire situation reclassified itself inside the Harris camp, not as a scandal, but as exploitation. The cemetery footage, the captions, the tone, even the phrasing in the video started to look less like spontaneous behavior and more like rehearsed provocation. A staged emotional trigger designed to hit the most sensitive nerve possible in one of hip-hop's most unpredictable legacy figures. But while T.I. was trying to contain damage inside his home, another parallel move was happening outside of it. Because 50 Cent wasn't reacting publicly, he was reacting privately. And that's where the real shift began. Instead of posting, instead of mocking, instead of engaging the noise, 50 allegedly made a direct call. Not to media, not to lawyers, to the man believed to be behind the entire setup. And whatever was said on that call was enough to shut the man down completely for days. Phones off, silence, disappearance from public view. But that wasn't the end. It was the opening. Because shortly after, 50 received something unexpected. An anonymous message. One line. "He's not the only one involved. Look closer at King's circle." No explanation, no signature, no context. Just direction. And that was all 50 needed. Because now the situation stopped being emotional and became investigative. While the internet debated, argued, and amplified the drama, 50 shifted into a different mode entirely. Quiet calls, old contacts, industry memory, pattern recognition, names from the past resurfacing in conversations that had nothing to do with music and everything to do with loyalty and betrayal. And by the early hours of the morning, a second name began to appear repeatedly in his internal findings. Someone close to King. someone who had access, someone who had been around longer than most people realized. A figure known as Smoke, a former affiliate of a production crew loosely tied to the same early 2000s Murder, Inc. ecosystem. Someone who disappeared when industry tensions collapsed, only to reappear years later around younger artists, posing as a mentor, a connector, a big brother figure in the background of rising careers. And according to what surfaced, Smoke had been close to King for months. Not loudly, not publicly, quietly, influencing language, framing perception, rewriting how King saw respect, legacy, and identity. You gotta show you different. Your father too clean for real beef. You don't stand next to legends by respecting them. You stand next to them by challenging them. To King, it sounded like empowerment. To everyone else watching closely, it was conditioning. Because by the time the cemetery video went public, King wasn't just speaking. He was echoing. And the scariest realization for both families wasn't just what had been done. It was how many hands were behind it before the world ever saw a second of footage. And now, with names surfacing, money traced, and intentions becoming clearer by the hour, one truth started forming underneath all the noise. This was no longer about a viral clip. It was about a carefully assembled chain of influence, ego, and old industry grudges, colliding through one young man who never realized he wasn't the one holding the pen in his own story. What makes this situation spiral into something far darker is the revelation that Smoke wasn't just advising from a distance. He wasn't just feeding ideas through messages. He wasn't just some background voice amplifying King Harris' ego. He was physically there. And that changes everything. Because according to sources close to the situation, Smoke was the one who provided the exact location of the cemetery, not the mastermind, not the ex-Murder, Inc. affiliate, Smoke. He knew it because of a connection most people would never trace back. Someone he used to work with years ago lived on the same block as the area surrounding Sabrina Jackson's burial site. That connection gave him knowledge most outsiders would never have. But what matters more is not how he knew. It's why he used it. Because Smoke didn't just pick a random location. He chose a place designed to trigger maximum emotional impact. A place tied directly to 50 Cent's deepest trauma. A place that isn't just symbolic, it's personal history carved into the ground. And then he brought King there. That's the part that reframes everything. Because the footage everyone watched, the laughter, the disrespect, the casual pointing at graves like it was a set, wasn't a solo act. It was King improvising for attention. Smoke was there the entire time. Behind the camera, guiding it, shaping it, even laughing at moments that would later become internet shockwaves. Insiders now claim Smoke wasn't just filming passively. He was directing the energy in real time, feeding King phrases, encouraging him to repeat lines, nudging him toward moments that would later go viral. Say it again. Do it louder. Don't act scared now. Those were King's instincts. They were instructions disguised as hype. And it doesn't stop there. Because after the cemetery footage, Smoke allegedly pushed King into a second shoot, a follow-up video, a darker one, this time filmed near symbolic locations tied to 50 Cent's early life, places that represented origin, struggle, identity. A second symbolic strike, a continuation of a pattern. According to multiple claims circulating internally, Smoke even arranged transportation for that shoot. He planned angles, suggested wording, and at certain points allegedly recorded alternate takes as if this was not chaos, but production. That's when the story stops looking like a viral meltdown and starts looking like something engineered. A structured attempt to weaponize attention. Inside the Harris household, the moment T.I. got access to King's phone, everything collapsed into confrontation. Messages, voice notes, location pins, payment receipts, all tied back to smoke. And the most damaging piece wasn't even the footage itself. It was a message buried in the thread. "We about to humble a legend. Welcome to the big leagues." That line reportedly triggered T.I. immediately. Not just anger, not frustration, something sharper. Because now it wasn't just about disrespect, it was about intent. A planned escalation targeting a cultural figure with decades of history. Witnesses say T.I. confronted King directly after reading it, his voice raised, pacing the room. "He's using you," he said. "He don't care what happens to you. You're not part of anything, you're the tool." But King didn't see it that way. He was still trapped inside the narrative smoke built around him. The idea that this was elevation, that this was recognition, that older industry figures finally saw him in a way his father's generation didn't. So instead of backing away, he pushed harder. "He believes in me," King reportedly said. "You just don't get it." That line reportedly broke the tone of the entire room. Because now it wasn't just manipulation, it was loyalty to the manipulator over family. Tiny Harris, according to insiders, broke down after hearing that exchange. Not because of rebellion itself, but because of how cleanly the influence had replaced trust. And then came the financial layer. When T.I. reviewed transactions tied to King's recent activity, a pattern emerged that changed the interpretation entirely. Small payments at first, then larger ones, all originating from accounts linked to smoke. $1,000, $3,500, $7,000, $12,000. The conclusion was unavoidable. This wasn't mentorship. It wasn't friendship. It was funding. King wasn't being guided by opinion. He was being paid into action. Every major step in the sequence, the cemetery visit, the filmed disrespect, the scripted tone, even the second video, now had a financial footprint attached to it. And that reframed everything T.I. thought he was dealing with. But while the Harris family was collapsing under internal shock, a parallel reaction was building elsewhere. 50 Cent was not reacting publicly. But behind the scenes, he had already shifted into investigation mode. Because for him, the graveyard footage wasn't the real issue. It was the structure behind it. He reportedly made a direct call to the X Murder Inc., affiliate tied to Smoke. No intermediaries, no management, just a direct conversation. And whatever was said on that call, it ended quickly and left the other party silent for days. But that wasn't the turning point. The turning point came after, because 50 Cent received a message from an unknown number. Just one sentence. "He's not alone, look at the kid's circle." That message changed the trajectory of everything, because now it confirmed what he was already suspecting. This wasn't a one-man instigation. It was a network, and networks leave traces. From that moment, 50 stopped reacting and started mapping. Names, connections, old affiliations, past beef history, industry overlaps that most people forgot, but he never did. By early morning, the picture became clear enough for one conclusion. King had been surrounded. Not randomly, not casually, strategically. And at the center of it all was Smoke. A man who, according to emerging information, had a history of moving between crews tied to old hip-hop conflicts, resurfacing years later around younger artists as a guide figure. Someone who could enter conversations as wisdom, but exit them as influence. And in King's case, influence became direction. Direction became action. Action became viral destruction. But the most dangerous part was, Ascent what Smoke did. It was what he created. Because while he disappeared the moment attention turned toward consequences, the damage had already spread beyond his reach. Now the narrative had two layers. On the surface, a young celebrity son making reckless decisions. Underneath, a coordinated manipulation using ego, resentment, and legacy wounds as fuel. And in that structure, King was never the architect. He was the output. A carefully positioned piece in a conflict he didn't fully understand. And as Smoke vanished from all known channels, phones off, accounts deleted, physical location untraceable, the silence he left behind didn't calm the situation. It escalated it. Because silence in moments like this doesn't mean peace. It means someone saw the consequences coming and left before they arrived. What makes this situation so unsettling is not just what happened, but who was involved in making it happen, and how carefully the entire thing was engineered from the shadows. Behind all the clips, all the reactions, and all the viral chaos, there was a deeper layer nobody saw at first. A hidden third figure, a man with industry connections, long memory, and a personal grudge that never really died. Years ago, he had tried to build something big in entertainment, a network of influence, projects, and control, but it collapsed. And in his mind, it didn't collapse because of failure, timing, or bad luck. It collapsed because of 50 Cent. That belief turned into obsession, and obsession eventually turned into planning. Instead of confronting 50 Cent directly, he chose a different strategy, a slower one, a quieter one, psychological warfare, not aimed at fame or money, but aimed at emotional damage. And in his mind, there was only one real weak point: Sabrina Jackson, 50 Cent's late mother. He understood something dangerous. You can't shake 50 Cent with money. You can't shake him with fame. You can't shake him with threats. But if you touch something personal, something sacred, you might get a reaction. So he didn't act alone. He brought in two men who already had their own reasons to resent 50 Cent. One was Smoke, a man tied to old industry circles, bitter about being forgotten. The other was a former Murder Inc. connected affiliate, someone who still carried the weight of old beef from the early 2000s. Neither of them needed convincing. They needed direction. And the third man gave them exactly that. Meanwhile, King Harris became the center of it all, but not because he was the mastermind. He wasn't even fully aware of how deep the situation had gone. He was the easiest piece on the board. Young, emotional, eager to prove himself, desperate for respect that he felt he hadn't been given on his own terms. They didn't see a young artist trying to find identity. They saw a tool, someone who could be guided, influenced, and pushed just far enough to create impact without fully understanding the consequences. And slowly, that's exactly what happened. Whispers in his ear turned into instructions, advice turned into direction, and direction turned into action. The cemetery location wasn't random. It wasn't discovered. It was provided. The symbolism was intentional. The emotional trigger was deliberate. Even the words King said on camera weren't fully his own. They were shaped, repeated, reinforced. Smoke didn't just film the moment. He helped construct it. And after the first clip exploded online, there was no stopping what came next. Because this wasn't meant to be a one-time stunt. It was part of something bigger. A staged sequence designed to escalate tension step by step. The graveyard video was only the beginning. The second piece of footage, filmed near another emotionally loaded location tied to 50 Cent's past, was already in motion before the first one even went viral. Different angles, different takes, different emotional tone, all engineered to push a reaction. But something unexpected happened. Leaks started slipping out too early. And that's when control began to break. Inside the Harris household, panic didn't arrive as headlines. It arrived as silence, confusion, and disbelief. T was reportedly furious, not at the internet, but at the situation itself, at the realization that his son had been pulled into something he never fully understood. Attempts to reach King failed, messages unanswered, calls ignored. And in the background, King wasn't stopping. He was still recording, still listening, still being guided by voices he trusted more than warnings from his own family. Older figures around him kept reinforcing the same idea. Don't back down, don't apologize, don't show weakness. That mindset slowly replaced judgment. But what King didn't see was that every step forward was being monitored, documented, and fed into something larger. Then came the turning point. A digital folder surfaced on 50 Cent's side. Screenshots, voice notes, payment records, messages, patterns. And one sentence stood out above everything else. We're about to humble a legend. That's when everything changed. 50 Cent didn't respond emotionally. He responded structurally, quietly, methodically, the way people who have survived long enough in conflict usually do. And once he understood the full picture, his focus shifted. Not toward King, toward the people behind King. Because in his eyes, this was no longer about disrespect. It was about orchestration, manipulation, intent. And when the third mastermind realized that his name was no longer hidden, panic set in. Calls stopped being answered, public appearances disappeared, projects were delayed, meetings were canceled. A sudden vanishing act that only confirmed one thing: fear had entered the equation. Smoke was already gone. The affiliate was under pressure. And the third man, the one who started it all, was now exposed to someone he never expected to fully map the situation this fast. Then came the message from 50 Cent. Everyone involved will be dealt with. No jokes, no performance, no ambiguity. Just intent. And in the middle of all this, King Harris posted something that made everything worse. A blurry late-night clip, his voice calm but detached, saying it was already too late. At that point, the internet stopped debating what was real and started debating what would happen next. Because the most dangerous part wasn't what had already been released. It was what hadn't been released yet. The second video still existed, and multiple people had access to it. Different hands, different motivations, different timing. Some were holding it for leverage. Some were holding it for protection. Some were holding it for destruction. And no one knew who would press send first. What started as a reckless attempt at attention had now turned into a layered situation involving influence, manipulation, old industry grudges, and emotional triggers that go far deeper than entertainment drama. King Harris may have been the face on camera, but he was never the one controlling the story. And now, with every side aware of what the others know, the situation is no longer about a video. It's about what happens when all the hidden layers finally collide at once. And in this kind of environment, silence is never peace. It's preparation.